Okay, worthless losers, have something very special for you, even though you don't deserve it. I got a chance to interview another former comrade of mine. You may remember him by the name of Comrade Wallace. Now, this is somebody who worked with Harold just as closely as I did, although for maybe a little less than a year, and then he realized, this is bullshit. I'm getting the hell out of here. And, I couldn't say it at the time, but I was, secretly cheering him on. Of course, the whole time telling Harold, "Oh yeah, what a little wussy. He just couldn't cut it out here. He's not, alpha Aryan material. He doesn't get to be one of the thousand. He's just gonna, go off to what I didn't tell him was obviously a way better life. Yeah, he's just gonna go off to some hellhole, leaving the homeland. Yeah, we don't need people like that." But again, all the whole time, I was very glad to hear that he was getting out, that he was going back to the real life that he had left behind, and that he was able to do it a lot easier than I was. With no children, no wife, or anybody like that to consider, he was able to just lift himself out of the equation and just look back on it as a horrible mistake. So, anyway, here he is. Here's Wallace.
So we have with us Comrade Wallace. Many of you remember Wallace from Radio Free Northwest.
That's correct, and thank you for having me on here, giving me an opportunity to share my experiences, and hopefully some of your listeners will benefit from it. Just to let everyone know, I'm just going to give my first name is actually Mike, not Comrade Wallace at all. So if you want to refer to me like that throughout the interview, that's fine.
So, Mike, first, can you tell us kind of how you came into the white movement in the first place?
Well, like most people, I think a lot of younger people struggle with identity and issues like that as they're growing up, especially from a multi-ethnic society, even among white people themselves. I came upon the writings of David Lane on the Internet. I was looking into various things, and when I came upon them, the first thing was actually the Pyramid Prophecy, a very bizarre article considering numerology and all this, and apparently he identified himself as some kind of prophet of white nationalism, but one of the other things he identified with was Odinism, something that was a little bit new to me at the time. I, felt kind of interested in it. I turned away from Catholicism and was kind of, looking for something else spiritually stimulated. So when I came upon this idea, it interested me, and heard of David Lane's rationale, and supported by most, if not all others in the movement, that the white race is going extinct, and it's our responsibility to do something about it, because if we don't, all the heritage and everything of value we've done or created will pass away, and that'll be bad. So needless to say, I thought it was my obligation to do something about this. And now that I've been, made aware of this issue, I had this responsibility to go forward and, give my support, to a cause that would support this ideal.
Okay. And what was it about Harold's cause and the Northwest Front that really drew you in?
Well, interestingly enough, as he brags about on his show, the Northwest Front is the only thing with a plan. We have a plan, no one else does. We have this grand idea. It's very feasible. It was tried by so many other people. Now, I got involved with it more through like Odinist and as a true movement. There were other individuals involved with this that I was affiliated with at the time. At first it started out as, something pretty harmless, a bunch of people just, doing a spiritual practice of their own, but then those novels were introduced. Someone came upon them, ordered them on the Internet, and then we all had to read them, and that's what started it. That is when, the political ideology completely and totally eclipsed everything else, and when you have a lot of angst and you're, feeling unhappy about a situation, books like that really do have an appeal. So I think only 4 of them were out at the time. That's kind of what got the ball rolling, so to speak, in regard to the Northwest idea.
Right. So how did you talk to Harold online for a little bit before really choosing to get involved with the group? How did you get into his inner circle?
Well, it started out, we did the, the typical online correspondence with the intro packets. We read the novels and everything. I don't remember if this was before or after I visited there. I'm sure that I made at least one recording on RFN that I sent in. He does that. He'll take, an audio file somebody makes and sends in to him. I did one of those for the podcast, and then, before I even moved out there, I did make a trip out, to visit Harold in Washington, which I did do. And, so I met him, got to see him face to face and, kind of maintained the correspondence ever since. I think the thing that impressed him the most, though, was the fact that, one day I literally did just pack up my things and move out there as he had requested of all like-minded people to do.
Right. And now you made your first trip with some friends that were in your group there?
There was one other person. Interestingly enough, there were, a handful of us that were all very gung-ho about the Northwest idea. Now, two of them stopped. They didn't want anything to do with it. One guy in particular, interestingly enough, he was a lot more into it even than I was. He actually made a trip of his own to Washington even before I did. But when he saw it wasn't, all it was cracked up to be, he, decided to pull out. And, of course, not everyone else was happy about that at the time. But, you would think that was some kind of indicator that maybe we shouldn't go forward with this. But no, the rest of us did. Eventually, one of the other guys wasn't too far behind him. It was me and one other person, and us two actually went out to Washington on that initial visit. And, we met with Harold. Talked to him a little bit, and then, several months later is when I actually, made my trip out there.
Okay. And then, did you have any kind of plan for how things were going to go? I mean, I know you stayed with some other Northwest Front members. I mean, did you have a job lined up, or did you just throw everything in your car and drive off?
Actually, it was more I kind of just threw everything in my car and drove off. I didn't have a job lined up. I did look, but I didn't really find a whole lot. Sometimes it can be kind of difficult to actually get a job lined up. But I did feel like, if I tried hard enough, I would eventually find something, and I did. It didn't take me long to find a job after I got out there. There were some others who were kind enough to, help me out with a place to stay. But I eventually did get established on my own. On the days I wasn't working, I did, offer Harold, help, which he took me up on, and that was the other thing I did. But no, I didn't have that much of a plan. Basically the important thing for me was just, go get out there, then do whatever you have to do to help the cause. That was kind of my, I guess you could even say obsession at the time.
What were some of the things that Harold had you do for him?
To be honest with you, a lot of it was, I guess, what you call kind of secretarial work, involving mail, mailing out the newsletters, responding to certain correspondences, work very similar to what you've described on your show already. I did answer emails. I wrote, letters in response, thank you letters for donations, stuffing envelopes, a lot of things like that. It was just kind of what might be typical office work for, some type of political organization.
Most of the time, did you feel like you had really done the right thing, like you were doing something useful?
Oh, absolutely. When I first got out there, I mean, like I said, I thought this is it. This is the only plan that there is, to help with this cause. I have to do it. I have to be the one, even if, nobody else is doing it, even if I have to do it by myself. From all these people who claim to be involved, I ended up being the only one to do it. But, for the first couple months, I really had that good feeling, like, kind of a feeling that you're doing the right thing, that I'm doing what's necessary, in a time when no one else is. And, that can be, a good feeling for someone to have, to feel like they're doing something right and, doing what's necessary. And, couple that with all the rhetoric of the movement and all the propaganda and all their talking points, it can really pull someone in and get them involved with things like this. And that's, I guess, what happened to me.
Okay, yeah, because I did talk to a lot of people, while I was still there who just kind of assumed that things that Harold had written about were already happening.
Yeah, no, not at all. And, I mean, thank goodness for that. I mean, some of the things that are in his novels, if anyone ever attempted to do these things, it would result in a total disaster. There's absolutely no need to, take things to that length. And people who cry, oh, well, our race is going to go extinct if we don't. Actually, your race might go extinct if you do. Things like that I don't believe are the answer. And I really do, feel obligated to say it in a public forum. I mean, if you're, that angry with things, to do something like that is not going to help. It's just, it's going to create so many more problems, so many unforeseen that no amount of novels could cover it all.
Yeah, humans in general may very well be extinct in the next 100 years. I mean, we seem to love killing each other.
That's a pretty good point. Well, I think you made a point earlier. Even if an all-white society was to be established, however that would happen, these things aren't going to stop. I mean, people have been doing things like this to each other over religion, over, different ideologies, different ethnicities. I mean, it happens. There is more people doing damage to each other, all of the same race, than there is, interracial violence. It's just, it's human nature. It happens. And
right, and I don't know if you've been around other types of white movements, if you've been around groups like the NSM or other skinhead groups or the creativity movement, Christian identity groups. Those people tend to really hate one another, and they're all white.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and that right there is a good point. I mean, these people just, I don't know exactly what their problem is, but it seems they have some really deep-set issues that they need to get worked out.
Now, was there a moment in Washington where you suddenly realized, what the hell did I just do? What is this that I'm wasting my life with?
Well, there wasn't really just one moment. There were a few, actually several, turning points. One of them came when one of my friends visited me while I was out there. He said, on second thought, I'm back on board with the Northwest Front. I think this has potential. I want to do something different. I'll come out there. So at first I was thrilled. I thought, okay, this is good. I'll have someone else with me. There'll be another migrant. This will be great. He came out there, saw what I was doing, and he left. He only stayed like a day or two and just went back and was left me kind of disappointed in the situation at the time. But I remember talking to him maybe about a week later after that trip, and he said, why don't you just come back here? You don't really have any duty out there after all. You're not accomplishing much of anything. There's plenty of people here that would love to see you come back, and it's like he told me he'd always been afraid I was just going to basically turn into Harold while I was out there, and he said, when I visited you and I saw you, it seemed like that was already starting to happen. So that, yeah, and I mean, that was one thing. And I remember even after talking to him, after the conversation was over, just seeing that open door was still there, it kind of felt like a weight was kind of lifted off my shoulders. And, so if that's the case, it's like I came out here to do, to do something real, to do something serious, and most importantly, recruit other people to this cause. I mean, they're not going to take it seriously at all, and I thought that was when I really started to think maybe it was a serious mistake, after all, to try this all together, and, it just, I didn't see it going anywhere. I thought the whole thing was just going to be, over before it even began, and it's not an easy thing to have to admit, but, it's the truth. I had to, realize, I made a mistake in this, and, I have to do something else now. A lot of people in the movement have way too much pride to ever possibly be able to make that admission. It's not an easy thing to make, but, sometimes you just got to face the facts and then move on.
Right, and I think I said a couple weeks ago, like, what if, Harold just stopped doing what he's doing, just said, you know what, this isn't working, I've wasted 40 years of my life, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to, write for a newspaper or maybe be a real radio announcer somewhere. I mean, he could do that, but I don't think his pride will ever let him do anything other than what he's doing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I mean, it is a shame. I mean, to give the man his due, he is a very talented writer. His non-racial novels are very good. They're very good stuff. He probably could have had a, moderately successful career. It's just kind of like underground, maybe, slightly politically incorrect author of novels, and I think you would have done, a lot better.
Yeah, anybody could. I mean, like I said, as long as you don't have a long list of felonies and a face full of tattoos, I mean, anybody could just stop this and have a real life. I can't name any really successful people in the movement. You don't really see people in this movement with anything. They've racked up several divorces. They've got children who never want to speak to them. They're living in a little shoebox.
And I think that's a very good point. And I think another good point you made, and one of the reasons your website and your show is such a good thing, I think a lot of people in the movement need to hear that, yes, there is another way. You can do something else. Because sometimes when you're in the midst of it, you sometimes feel like you can. You think, I've committed this much. I've invested so much already, and there's nothing else I'd ever be able to do. Well, that's really not the case. I think there's a lot more they'd be able to do and be a lot better at it for that matter as well.
Now, did you do anything while you were in Washington, like meet with other new potential migrants or people who are interested in joining?
I mean, I actually did do a little bit of that, yes. I mean, there weren't very many meetings like that, but there were some. I don't know what eventually came of any of them because I really wasn't there that long, in the grand scheme of things. To be honest with you, I really wasn't even in the movement for all that long when you really, look at it from my time from start to finish. I wasn't in it, nearly as long as a lot of people are.
And then when you first brought up with Harold or with anyone else that you were thinking of going back home, what was their reaction?
Harold's, well, he sort of saw the suspicion. I was starting to express feelings of doubt to him, and then I think that's what turned him on to it. And, he was trying really hard to get me to not do that. Me and him both, kind of put our heads together, so to speak. We were really afraid, when I visited at my home, and which I did while I was in Washington before I moved back there was going to be this big intervention staged. And I mean, nothing as dramatic as that ever happened, but he gave me some of the quotes he mentioned in his book, which can be very persuasive. One of them, I slept and dreamed that life was beauty. I woke and found that life was duty. That was one that resonated with me even before I moved out there. And he reminded me of that. And of course, it just, pulled on the heartstrings and all that. And, but in a way, he kind of overdid it so much to where it didn't even work anymore. Then he started quoting these IRA men. Apparently one of them, I don't remember what his name is, and I don't remember all the details of the event, but he did something like blow up a building or something like that. And, there were children weeping on the news because their parents had been hurt or something. And somebody asked this man about this, and he said, well, I won't let the tears of children, prevent me from fulfilling my duty, or, something to that effect. That's pretty close to the quote, if not exact. And I thought, this is just not even somebody I want to be like at all. Whatever this guy thinks his duty is, screw him and his duty. You don't do things like that. And I, sure as hell, I'm not going to be the one to do anything like that. And it's just one of those things. I mean, you read about it in the books and you think it's all okay until the reality of it hits you. And I'm just very glad it hit me then, and and not after something like this had actually happened. That that's not okay. That that's not the way to do things. And in the end, I don't want to start a war. That's not a good thing to do, and I'm not going to be the one to do that, is basically what it boiled down to. So, his reaction to it kind of turned me away even more. And then when I actually made the announcement to some other friends of mine before him. It's a strange situation, but basically, before I got a chance to contact Harold, they went around behind my back and told them about it. Before I got the chance to catch up with him, said, Harold, he's going to leave. And of course, he already heard about it. So when I met with him for the last time, he said he was disappointed, but that he also did kind of see it coming.
What if you were still here, and, maybe 5 years from now you were still here and you were his unpaid manservant, and I don't know, what if he died and then you were expected to take over everything from then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one possible course of offense that, that things could have gone in. I mean, like my friend said, he said, I was already becoming the next Harold. I had already, I guess, kind of subconsciously, I adopted some of his mannerisms and slang, and I mean, it just wasn't good. And yeah, that very well may have happened, but I guess we'll never know for sure, and I think that's a good thing.
Do you have anything to say to anyone who might be like picking up Harold's novels and thinking, yeah, I want to do this, or maybe who just found his blog and is wondering how they can get involved?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I would like to say to them offhand, before considering any white nationalist ideology and things like that, they go on the premise, well, the white race is going to be extinct and it's our duty to save it. Well, there's no actual proof for sure that the white race is going to go extinct. They don't know that for sure. That's one possible way things can go. Mankind and events in the world are very unpredictable, if nothing else. So they don't know that offhand. Even if that is going to happen eventually, we'll all be dead by the time it does. And at that point, I don't know that it's really, going to be affecting us anymore. I don't think it's something we need to be that worried about. I think if we live in the moment and better ourselves and be more positive rather than bogged down in negativity, we'll have a better chance of seeing the world, for the better. We can at least do the best we can. What I think these 14 words and all of these other little phrases like that are, it's a tool of propaganda used by these white nationalist leaders to bring other people under their influence and control. As you said yourself, you don't really know all these many white nationalists who've been successful, and I'm sure they're very resentful of that, because truth be told, some of them can, at times, be somewhat talented. They're the rare exceptions, but a few of them are. So, they don't have the pull or influence or control over society that they want. They want to try and take it, and they want to bring others under their influence to be able to get that. And I think that's what this really is. So, with that as a consideration, I think someone really should think, consider these things before they do any of this Northwest Front business or anything involving white nationalism in general.
I think it's really interesting that a lot of the white nationalists, they say, well, it's up to all of you, everyone else, to do something about it, not me. I got too much other stuff to do. I mean, Harold doesn't do any of the things that he's telling everyone else to do. People encouraging, white women to have as many children as they possibly can, they're not out doing that. Even April Gage only has 3 children.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, without mentioning any names, I mean, how good are many of these people as parents, in general? It's like, oh, it's all about white children. It's all about this. And, it's like, look, if you don't like the situation you're in, like, let's say they are in a bad neighborhood where there is a lot of crime and danger and violence, that doesn't mean they have to pack up and move all the way to the Northwest. They could just focus their efforts on moving to a better area. And they call on other people to do these things. Harold can't do the things in his novels because, it's just simply not feasible. He says if he had 1,000 Class A's to do this, he would be able to get something accomplished. But the thing is, when you hear his description of a Class A, anyone who falls under that category isn't going to bother with things like this because they'll be able to take care of themselves without it.
Right. I mean, I don't think Harold himself measures up to even his own standard of a Class A, so why would the Class A's listen to Harold?
Well, the premise is this idea of an arbitrary duty they have to their race. It's their duty, and that word can mean whatever anybody, wants it to mean. They describe it as if it's a necessity, and then they'll say, well, they'll always give some kind of reason maybe why they can't, but why other people should. But in the end, I don't think that's very persuasive. I think it'll work on people who really do want to do the right thing, and it'll work for a while, but I think sooner or later they'll either wake up to it and leave, or they'll probably just be brought down by it.
Right. Occasionally I'll see, if I check Harold's website, I'll see some posts from him going on about all the great job opportunities in Washington, so anybody who moves here will have no trouble finding one, but he hasn't worked in 15 years?
And, that's another interesting point. I mean, he does consider, the movement his job, and I know Harold has worked some very undesirable jobs in his past, but, it is an interesting point. All these job opportunities here, I mean, technically, even where I'm at, you could get a job if you really want one. That doesn't mean you'll be happy doing it. It doesn't mean you'll have a happy life. it might make you want to rip your hair out of your skull. But yeah, theoretically, you could get one. So I think people are looking for a little bit more than that out of life.
Right. And I mean, Harold is saying basically if you're not, I don't know, a lawyer or a physician or something, your income isn't possibly high enough to justify staying where you are.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's another thing as well. It's a lot easier said than done. There's a lot of things that are complicated. I mean, I know there are some trades that are not in high demand in the area I was at in Washington. I think electrician was one example. So, I mean, even if somebody has a marketable skill or a degree or something like that, it isn't a guarantee for employment. Is it possible to eventually find something like that? Well, yeah, I'm sure it is, but I mean, somebody who already has something established, that's a very big gamble to just pick up and move, somewhere else. It probably won't work out as well as they wanted to, unless they're either lucky or unless they have, some kind of connections or a detailed enough plan.
And I remember, I think it was when I was still in Oregon, just discovered Harold was listening to RFN. He was saying, don't just show up here with nothing and expect us to take care of you. You need to have a plan. And I wrote to him, and I was saying, well, what if you really just don't have anything? I mean, you don't want us to stay where we are if we're not in the homeland, but then you don't want us to show up with nothing. So, I mean, what if we don't make enough money to really save up a lot? What if we can't buy a home? And his advice to me was basically, well, those people just need to get credit cards.
Oh, boy, well, that probably wouldn't work out too well. But, yeah, for one thing, they probably couldn't even get credit cards either. But, yeah, that's another thing. It's like, you're supposed to, give it all up for the movement, but then at the same time, but you just have to have enough, to establish yourself and keep yourself up afloat. And I think a lot of people who would even be inclined to consider, the Northwest imperative and all that stuff probably wouldn't have much to begin with. It's probably why they're feeling unhappy to begin with. And, if you're kind of excluding people like that, what do you really have left? Not all that much.
Right, and so he wants us to give it all up for the movement, but right now the movement consists of answering Harold's mail, his email, that he's too busy to, hit reply on. It was kind of like that when I was in the NSM. It was like, you must recruit, you must pass out these flyers and recruit people in order that they may pass out more flyers. Like that was our entire movement. We put things on people's cars.
Yeah, and it's kind of going around in a circle. I mean, these people, I'm sure a lot of them do want to do something good, but I mean, in the end, they really have to consider, what else is out there, that they can be doing with their time to better themselves. If they, spent all that time distributing flyers, maybe doing something else, non-movement related at all, they might accomplish more things. Maybe if they spent more time reading. They might, expand their horizons a little bit. There's a number of things, really, but, it's just that whole idea, get more to become involved. That's also how you attract, troublemakers and people who are on the fringe to begin with, so they gravitate to things like this, and then they mess it all up. I mean, I've seen this happen several times, and I haven't even been in it that long. And this is why it's kind of like they lead to their own undoing eventually.
Now, these heathen groups you're involved in, that's kind of a pagan religious group?
Yeah, I mean, it's commonly known as Odinism or Asatru. Generally, it usually involves the Norse mythos, the Norse mythology, involving Odin and Thor and Freya and all of those, very interesting stuff for people who are interested.
And do they know the purpose of your move to Washington?
A lot of them do now, since coming back. I think they, beforehand they kind of knew, but, I guess they kind of saw how determined I was and, to do it. And, some of them did try to persuade me not to go, but, in the end, I mean, I literally believed I had to do this. And, I mean, in a way, I'm still glad I did because it was a major learning experience, but, yeah, I mean, for the most part, they know it's pretty much something I don't really volunteer any information about, and most people really don't ask me about it often, and there's some that don't know about it at all.
Right. I guess really it was a fairly short time.
Yeah, it was a very short span of time, but, it was very, very eventful. The couple friends that I have that were involved with this and eventually came out of it as well, it's kind of like I feel really close to them because they get it. They've been there and back again, so to speak.
Anything to say to Harold? Any advice?
Nothing in particular. I doubt he'll be, very receptive to, anything I have to say. But, for what it's worth, you and I, have been able to move on. It is possible to establish a better life for yourself. Just make a career as a writer. I think there's a lot of people that would, still buy his books, even if he, got rid of the whole Northwest ideology, even the racial stuff for that matter, unless maybe on a minimal level. But if he just became a fiction writer, and gave all this stuff up, I know I might even be interested, to read more of this stuff.
Yeah, I think I said before, leaving the white nationalist movement, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to necessarily have the great life you've always wanted, but I think everyone who has left has had a better life. I've never seen anybody leave and their whole life just gets worse,
I think that's a good point, as well, because, you're not steeped in negativity all the time. You don't have the weight of the world, on your shoulders. One thing I was surprised to learn, specifically in your previous podcast with the interview with the Jewish woman that left, I was surprised to learn how many people actually have left it. When I did, I thought I was going to be some kind of rare exception, but it turns out that a lot more people do than I originally thought. And, if all of their situations are improving, that should really tell you something.
Yeah, and I remember Harold told me a couple times, you kind of like that song, you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. You'll be back. He was trying to tell me that this was my destiny, and there was just no getting away from it.
He's very emphatic on that. It's a person's destiny. It's a person's duty. He says on RFN, he refers to mainstream media and things of that nature, like television, all these things. He says, once you pull that television plug out of your head, you can't put it back in. Meaning once you've perceived all these things as negative and, not beneficial to you, you're not going to be able to go back on that. But I say once you pull the movement plug from your head, you can't put that back in either. It's like once you've closed the door on this stuff, then you know. And there's some people that are too proud to admit it, but those who can, you don't go back. It's...
Right. I can't think of any situation in the world that could happen that could make me think, I want to hook back up with Harold. I want to join the Northwest Front again. I want to get involved in white nationalism all over again. I think that will be the right choice for me, and I'm going to really do it this time.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good point. I can't see it happening with me either. I don't think anybody that has been that involved in it and left really could. I think that's probably true for a lot of groups.
People occasionally, they leave their church and then they might do some thinking and rejoin the church because maybe they find that their life was actually enriched by their faith. I don't think white nationalism is enriching anybody's life. Just kind of giving them other people to hang out and tell racist jokes with.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's probably what some people are seeking. That's probably why, they go to that to begin with, and then they see what it really is and, and leave it. But yeah, I don't think it could give you, and there are some people that kind of do, elevate it to, that sort of level, but I just, I don't see it that way anymore.
Okay, so in this list of points, your last one, you say here, people do not have some arbitrary duty that some leader intends to put on them. The only duty they have is to themselves, to make themselves better and prosper as best they could. What do you think your actual duty is?
Well, that's a pretty loaded word, duty. I find it's something that, if you just better yourself, you'll eventually find out what it is. I am not going to lie to you. I'm, still trying to figure it out for sure. I have some ideas about what that might be. But I think if you really take a step back, think about what's, really important.
What I think is interesting is that there's a need for so many of these movements because white people, they don't like each other. They don't want to be around each other. They can't get along with each other. it's always, well, screw you, I'm starting my own thing with, me and 2 friends. We're going to be a group of 3 members, and it's going to be so much better than your group of 4 members.
Yeah, and that's not, really going to accomplish anything at all. I mean, I've seen the same thing happen, in the pagan movements and things like that. I actually think that's another, just one of these human things. It's just, people, it's because it attracts so many eccentrics. I mean, these fringe groups attract strong personalities, which could mean sometimes a strongly good personality and a lot of times a very strongly negative personality. And when all people like this come together, there tends to be clashing and infighting, and they'll break off. And I think it's just a continual cycle like that.
Right. And I've noticed since I left, the most common questions I get, nobody wants to know, well, like, why did you leave? Or, what made you join in the first place? Or what was your turning point? They all want to know, is Harold gay? Is Harold Jewish? Is Harold schizophrenic? They want to know, some personal, juicy details about certain people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like that just, feed off of that kind of thing. They like the drama. They like all the nonsense. Maybe they have some kind of personal gripe with Harold, and they just want to hear someone who knows him say it so that they can go off and tell their friends, oh, I heard from so-and-so, about this person. And there's been all kinds of talk like that. Even these leaders, they really hate one another. It's just, they even have so many falling outs with themselves. I think you even said yourself, April Gady began speaking highly of Harold, and then, eventually just, she's not on good terms with him at all. I'm not surprised by that at all.
Right. Okay. That's all I had. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think I've pretty much said everything I need to say. Thank you again for letting me come on here. It's much appreciated. And just once more, I just hope there's folks out there that might benefit from this. I think they will.
So what I hope you all got out of that interview is that I am not the only one who, got to know Harold and just realized, okay, I'm getting the hell out of here. Not the only one who just kind of decided that the whole white nationalist movement was not for me. He did say earlier it was part of a kind of an identity-seeking thing, and I think to some extent it was that way with me too. I felt like I found a family, I found a cause. This is mine now. And I hope eventually anybody who joined up for those reasons will realize there are better ways, start a real family. Get real friends. Get a real life. Don't surround yourself full of people who, are going to turn on you when it's revealed that you don't want to be with them anymore. So, I think I'll end in the style of Harold here.